Hey guys, today we're going to be creating these pop-up message boxes where you hover over these options and then the associated message box pops into existence. And the cool thing about this, and it will be the main focus of this tutorial, is that when we hover up, as you can see, it just automatically goes to the next option above, and they're not obscured by the message box that is already opened. That's already opened, like this one here. And yeah, so if you didn't follow the method that's explained throughout the length of this tutorial, then this message box here would obscure the above option and we wouldn't be able to select it. But with and you can also go really fast, as you can see, and everything works without errors. But yeah, if we just followed the normal method, then we won't be able to do this. And if you're wondering where this I'll close the page now, but if you're wondering where the idea for this effect came from, it comes from Stripe. If you go to the pricing page, then you should be able to see it here, and I've just recreated the top row. But as you can see, this is where I got it from. It's not exactly the same, but it's close enough, as you can see. Very similar. So yeah, if learning how to create this interests you, then keep watching and find out how to create this. Okay, and before we start this tutorial, it's worth mentioning that the completed project can be found on CodePen in the description box below. So if you're stuck at any point in the tutorial, then you can head on over here and look at what the finished result is here. So hopefully this will solve your queries. But anyway, I should move on now and talk about the Webpack boilerplate that I've created for you. You don't have to use it for this tutorial, but it does save a lot of time if you just follow along with the instructions here and clone it from GitHub into your project folder. So what we'll do, we will create a new project folder here, and I'll just say message boxes new, and then what I will do is I will launch up a terminal like so, and then instead of your app, I'll change this to a dot to launch to create the project in this empty project folder. So in the current folder that the terminal is opened up in, and as you can see, that will copy it in here. And then we don't need to cd into it because our terminal's already in the folder of the project. But we will need to remove the origin, and then we'll need to install the dependencies. And the reason why we're using the Webpack boilerplate is because it's already set up with Babel and some other things like post CSS with auto prefix, etc. So this will simply allow us to use the latest JavaScript and CSS features, and it will automatically compile it so that it's more compatible with older browsers. So that's the reason why we're using Babel. It also allows us to use ES6 imports, etc. And all of that will get compiled into a single JavaScript file, so we don't need to worry about compatibility in terms of imports. So this is quite helpful so that you use the boilerplate, you don't have to set it up manually. So once we've done all that, we will launch up VS Code, which is a very good source code editor. Definitely recommend it, but chances are you're already using it anyway if you're watching this tutorial, unless you're using Sublime or something. But anyway, as it says in the markdown, which you should probably delete actually because we don't need it for this project, we will launch the script dev using npm ref. The script name is dev, and this will start a local server on port 9000 containing our project. As you can see, this is what I'll set the boilerplate to be, but we can delete this, and because it's got hot reload, the change will automatically get reflected without us needing to refresh anything. And we'll zoom in so that you can actually see what's going on. But essentially, the first thing that we will do is, because this is just a dummy website with a single HTML file that's being hosted, we will set the body to be display flex, and then we'll expand the height out to be 100% of the viewport, so that we can align things in the center vertically. Obviously we can already do that horizontally because it's already 100% of the width of the viewport, but just not the height. So yeah, we'll set align items to be center and to center things vertically. And then what we'll do, it's very common to create a container class in CSS projects. Bootstrap has one that's very famous, but this is our one. Well, I wouldn't say famous, but you know, it's just very commonly used, probably the most commonly used class in Bootstrap. Well, no, I don't use Bootstrap, but yeah, so we'll center it in the middle with this margin. The padding, we'll give some padding on left and right. The width, we'll set that to be 100%, but then we'll also set max width to be 1200 so that it can't exceed, well, that needs to be pixels. It can't exceed 1200 pixels. So if we have a container on the body, we'll create one using Emmet abbreviation, and then we set the background color to be red. Again, this is just so that you can see what's going on. Height to be 500 pixels, go back, again we don't need to refresh. As you can see, this is our container class, and due to our body, the flex being applied to our body, it's centered in the middle of the page, and now it's 100% width, but then obviously it can't exceed 1200, which is the reason why it stays at this width when our 100%, when our viewport is a lot wider, considerably wider than the width of 1200 pixels. What we'll then do, basically we're using BEM to do this, so we'll create a flex modifier for this container block. If you don't know what BEM is, I'll advise that you look it up. There's some good videos already out there on YouTube, so I won't explain it, and besides we don't really have time to explain it in this tutorial anyway. We'll set the flex wrap to be wrap, so that when the horizontal width is exceeded, it will start a new row automatically. And then we'll set the padding top 16 pixels, and we'll do the same for the bottom as well, so that this does have padding on both the top and bottom, and this doesn't, obviously, which is the reason for the 0. But if we apply this, then all of a sudden this element will have vertical padding. Apply it like so. And then what we'll do after this, we will create 3 container sections like so, because we want 3. Obviously you saw at the start, you saw those 3 columns, and this is where they'll come from, essentially, those 3 columns. So we'll create that and we'll style them, but we'll only style the ones that are inside, that are children of the container block with a modifier of flex, which is the reason why we use the hierarchical selector. So we'll set display to be flex. No, sorry, that's not what we'll do. We'll set the width to be 33, like so. Obviously we use 3 threes instead of 3 recurring, which is obviously a third. That's about as close to a third as we're going to get. Obviously, you know, that's pretty precise as it is. Position will be relative because we're using absolute positioning as a child of this later on. Padding will be a bit weird, but it will become clear why we're doing this later on. We'll use 60 pixels on the top, 50 pixels on the right, 10 pixels on the bottom, 10 pixels on left. And the margin, 40 pixels top and bottom, 0 on the sides. And then what we'll do after this, we will copy, we'll copy it because we can't, whoops. Sorry, I'm using a different monitor now, so. But anyway, we'll copy the SVG from the official website. Again, obviously I don't expect you to do this now. You can copy this SVG tag from the code pen if you're following along. Obviously, as I said, link in the description. Anyway, I have added this class of container icon and we'll be styling that very shortly. Let me just get the other SVG elements. So I'll get the second one. Again, it has the container icon class applied to it. And then we'll get the last one, like so. Copy that in there. Again, it also has the class, it's not an outlier. And we'll copy this just to be efficient about how we do things. We'll set the position to be absolute. and then we'll set top, align the top edge of this icon with the top edge of the container section, its parent element. Left, we'll move it to the right a bit so that it's aligned with the text. Okay, we haven't actually created the text yet, but it's aligned with the elements that get affected by the padding, which is applied to the left of the container section. Obviously this isn't affected by that because its position is absolute. So if you go back, we should be able to see these SVG icons now. But obviously we need some more content, so what we'll do, again we'll copy just to save time. I mean, obviously I'm not going to copy paste this entire tutorial because otherwise it wouldn't really be a tutorial, but we should be safe to copy this because it's not too hard. So H2 with a class container header, and this is the text here. Again, you can get this from the code pen if you so desire, but it's not exactly hard really. You could type that out yourself. It will take about 10 seconds, maybe more, I don't know. Anyway, paste that one there. Obviously, there's different text for the different rows. And then we'll get this as well. Instead of icon, I believe it was header. And then we'll just say margin bottom 1.7 relative unit. So this is what we have here. Problem with this is that it looks good, but then on shrunken widths we get this horizontal scroll bar and everything's really squished up. So everything's really squished, so we will solve that using media queries. So what we'll do, we'll say at media max width, so this will apply to 879. So this will apply to everything that is less than 880 pixels essentially. We'll set the width to be 50%, and we'll copy this again, and we'll change it so apply to everything less than 680 pixels. But then once we have reached 680 pixels, this media query will apply until we've reached 880 pixels, in which case no media queries will apply. But we'll set the width to be 100%, so one column here, two columns here, three columns when no media queries are applied. So as you can see, this is what we have here. As you can see, it looks a lot better now. Okay, and what we'll now do, we won't complete the entire HTML file here, but we will do some of it because we need to in order to complete this tutorial. So we'll create an unordered list with a UL tag with a class container list. And UL tags good for compatibility, so that screen readers and other compatibility devices know that this is an unordered list. And what we'll do, the list items will have a class container list item, and along with the text which contains inside, it will also have a popover div which contained inside the li, and this will have container popover, a class of that. And just so that we have a completed list just for the first column, we'll copy these over. Again, they follow the same structure, li, same class, div with popover and the actual text of the li. And again, no different for the last two list items. No different for them. Again, code pen if this confuses you, but hopefully you should already know. If you're watching this tutorial, I expect you to already know. And you probably should if you've gotten this far anyway. Like the basics, HTML, etc. Anyway, obviously that's not going to look good at the moment because you haven't styled anything. So as for removing the full stop, again, we'll only style the container list within the container block with a modifier of flex, and we'll set the list style to be none, so that should remove the bullet point, as you can see, it does. And as for the Qixotl list item, the color, so the text color will be a sort of grayish color, and we'll just copy this, you know, because again we're copying a lot, but we don't want to waste your time, so 0.9 relative units for the top and bottom margin, and we'll set the position to be relative. You'll see why later on. As for now though, what we'll do, we'll create a modifier class we won't be using at the moment, but we'll use it later on, and all this does is simply change the color to be something else, to be well, as you can see, a more purple color. What we'll now do is we will replace the bullet point that we removed, and we'll replace it with a sort of tick, and the way that we'll do this is with the before pseudo element, that's what they're called. So you add two colons onto the end and then say before, and this will be represented as an actual element that is the first child. It's always going to be the first child of the class of the element that you decided to use the pseudo element on, the before pseudo element on. So the content will be nothing, so no text content. But as for the background, that will be a URL, and this image, this SVG image that we're linking to, will act as a replacement for the bullet point, and we'll say display in line blocks, so that it can be displayed next to the text and not below it, which is what we would use, which is what would happen if this was block, the default value for display. And because this is the first child, this will be displayed to the left of the text because it's before, so before the text or anything inside of the Qixotl list item. So obviously we'll need to give it some dimensions that we can actually see the image, and then we'll set margin right to push the text to the right more away from this image. And this currently won't work at the moment because we've still got the pop-up and this is interfering with what we have. So what we'll do is we'll style the popover position with absolute, so based off of this relative list item. Line height, very important. Again, setting the line height now will become very important later on, but not so important at the moment. Just trust me that it's very important that we do this. So left, we use minus units to move it more towards the left. If we use positive, then we would move it towards the right. In this for this left property anyway. And same with this, so we're using minus to move it more towards the top, and then we'll set the color to black to overwrite the greyish color that was set on the list item. Background color will be white, give it some border. Radius to round off those edges. And then we'll say padding, 15 pixels on top and bottom, 20 pixels left and right. Box shadow, again I'm just going to copy this, again because it'll be too long for me to write that out all by myself. Again, code pen, transition or elements, and we'll have ease in, ease out on that. And then we'll set opacity 0 and transform to be 0.5, but we're going to comment this out at the moment. This will simply be the starting state of the transition, because we will transition both the opacity and the transform property later on, but we'll comment that on now so that you can actually see the popover element that we've created, and the transform origin, which will be the center of where the transform applies to. So by default the scale applies to the top left, which is the origin of all elements, we will set it to be 8 pixels away from the right, sorry, away from the left edge to the right. It's 8 pixels to the right from the left edge, and 100%. So essentially the transform origin, which will be the center of, well, will be the anchor point essentially of the transform property, will be the bottom edge of the element and 8 pixels away from the left edge of it. So I hope that makes sense. So now if you go back, as you can see everything. Again, it doesn't look good at the moment, and that's because they're all appearing at once, and that never happens on the finished application. They all appear one after each other when we hover over that. When we hover over the associated list item. So lastly, what we'll do is we will create the arrow that points downwards towards the bullet point. Again, you can only towards the tick now, which you created as a replacement for the bullet point. And the way that we do this, again, we use another before pseudo element. Set the content to be nothing. Position will be absolute. So it's absolute based on the popover. And then we'll set left. 15 pixels towards the right, away from the left edge. Bottom, we use minus. Pixels to move it 8 pixels actually downwards from the bottom edge already. And the way that we create a downward pointing arrow in CSS is you set border top. If and because you want a white arrow, then use white as a color. But if you were to use if you wanted to create a pointing upwards triangle, then we would set this to be border top instead. But the rest of this would remain the same, with the rest of the border properties would anyway. And in our case, obviously the pixels determines how the size of the triangle that you want to create. And then we'll do the same for right as well. So now we should have, as you can see, we have a downward pointing arrow. So there it is there. What we'll now do is we will uncomment this. Again, so we'll get this weird thing. But again, we'll solve this because we're now done with the CSS. We're now done with the styling completely. It's now time to go on to the main bulk of this tutorial, and that is the JavaScript file. As you can see, we're importing the style sheets already, because we don't actually do that on the HTML file. We import them here because we're using style loader for Webpack, and when we import a style sheet, the styling automatically gets applied to the website from the JavaScript compiling that Webpack automatically does for us. So that's quite handy. The first thing that we will do is we will declare some references to elements. Notice that I say elements as a plural, which is the reason why we're using query selector all. So we will select all of the list items, the URL elements, within the container with a modifier of flex. And we'll copy this just so that we save some time. And instead, so we'll create a reference to all of the popover as well. Popovers. And then after that, we will declare a function that will be called immediately, straight away on document load. So this is us calling it immediately as soon as we've created the function. Inside, we'll leap through the array that we should have gotten back from the query selector all. And as you can see, we're using an arrow function, which is fine to use. We don't have to worry about compatibility reasons because of Babel. Babel included on Webpack. So that's the reason why I recommended that you use the Webpack template. And what we'll do inside won't really make much sense at the moment. But it will make more sense later on. We'll set all of the display to be none. So if we refresh, we don't get that weird effect anymore. And you might think that why don't we just set display to be none here, and that's actually a good question, but the reason being, it will be explained later on, the reason why we do that. At the moment, I can't really explain it at the moment, but just rest assured there is a good reason for this, and it will become clearer later on. Okay, and we'll now need to create some global variables, like so. Yes, this may, again, all be explained later on. Again, I know this is, but I'm doing it like this because just to save time, because if you keep on going back and forth, then that's going to take longer than is necessary. If you do it like this, although you might not understand things at the moment, it means that we do get to save some time in a tutorial that's already long. So what we're doing here, we're creating 3 variables. And these will all be, eventually anyway, these will all contain DOM elements, but we have to do them as global elements because we need to access them within event listeners and stuff. However, they get initialized outside of those event listeners. Yeah. But it's outlining the basic structure of these objects. Well, not all of them are objects, but so mouse pause will be, well, you'll see in a second, but that will be initialized in every single event listener. And then we'll say let container. We'll create 2 booleans now. And these booleans will just allow things to smoothly work and make sure that we don't get any errors or anything. And now what we'll do is, the first thing that we'll do is, just so that you get a bit more of an explanation, a bit more of an idea as to what we're actually doing, we'll create the mouse move event listener. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory as to every time this callback function will be called every time you move the mouse, obviously. And we'll say if popover isn't initialized, or if selecting new item is initialized, then we will return, because otherwise, so return, we won't proceed with the rest of the code contained inside. Essentially, we won't proceed if either of these conditions are met. However, if they are, then the first thing that we will do is we'll initialize the mouse pause x and y properties. So e.clientx will give us the x coordinates of our mouse currently, and we'll do the same for the y, obviously the y property, which we literally just created. E.clientY, obviously, and we'll just log that so that you have a better idea of what's actually going on here. So obviously expect console. Oh, that's true actually. Yeah, this one. Obviously, should have thought about that. That won't work obviously because popover is uninitialized. But yeah, obviously this is what we have. We are getting the x and y coordinates. So there you go. And because this is a global variable, mouse pause, we'll have access to these coordinates at any point during our application. See, that's good, but we will get this back now because of the other things that we will be doing. So we will loop through all of the list items. We'll loop through it like so. And what we'll do, we will add a mouse over event listener to every single one of them. So mouse over like so. And what we'll say, basically we'll say if either the container is selected, if that boolean is set to true, or window.innerWidth is less than 680. That corresponds to pixels, but obviously in JavaScript this just gets returned as a number, like so, an integer. So yeah, basically we don't want this effect on like smartphones and stuff. So when this media query is met, we basically don't want this, we don't want the message box effect at all, so the users just won't be able to view the message boxes. It's only an effect that is suitable for like desktops and laptops, etc., because they actually have the mouse to hover over things. Obviously smartphones, they don't have any mouse, so they can't really hover over anything, therefore it wouldn't make sense for us to make this effect for smartphones. So obviously if either of these conditions are met, then return, don't proceed with the rest of the code inside of this event callback. We will initialize event target if these conditions aren't met, obviously, and we'll set it to be the text elements that we are currently hovering over, and we get that from target. Target is the actual element that triggered the event in the first place. And then we'll set list item, and remember that selected class that we created a long while back. We'll currently add that to our element now, and that will change the color of it. Again, we'll just copy it from here, just so that we can save time. This will change our color to be, our text to be purple. Remember, purple with that color there. What we'll then do is we will create a function that we will call quite often, actually. Yeah, we'll call this function quite often every time we initialize a list item, and what it will do is it will initialize these other elements based off of the list item. You'll see how this works in a second. So first of all, we'll work out the offset pos. So we'll say offset pos.x list item, which has now been initialized because it will be called here. So after list item has been initialized, so we'll say list item dot offset left. So how offset is it based on its apparent element, which is container list. If you can see, so it's not container list, it is the actual, it's container section, sorry. Because here we go, this is position relative, and so this is its closest parent element that is actually positioned. So we bet how far away from the left edge of its container is it, essentially. And so we'll store that in offset pos.x. And then as for y, that will be the same, except we'll say offset top instead. And what we'll need to do is we'll do the other properties, and this will be offset left of the list item. Yeah, we're doing it all on one line, just that we don't bloat things out artificially. Plus the actual width of it. So basically this is its right edge offset. Offset left is obviously just the left edge, but if we add this to the client width, its actual width of the element, then this will be the right edge offset. Obviously that's just basic logic. And we'll need to do the same for the height using the same principle. So offset top, and then client height. Again, that shouldn't be too difficult. And then we'll need to get access to this actual container section, and because these list items they're two child elements down. So we go up one parent element and then we go up again, and then we'll get access to the container section that this container list is actually nested inside of. So we'll get access to it very simply like so. Equals list item dot parent element dot parent element. So that's how we use get the parent element of the parent element essentially, and then we'll get access to it. And then finally we'll initialize the popover, and we'll do that like so. We can use query selector to get access to it because popover is a direct child of the list item, so you can just do it very simply like so. There you go. Once you've initialized these global variables, we can say, just in case, I mean it's very unlikely, but if we made a mistake in our markup file, if we made a mistake there, then maybe popover doesn't actually exist on the DOM. If that's the case, then we need to return to prevent any errors from occurring, because we are actually going to work with popover now. So if it's uninitialized, then we'll get an error for these lines where we try to access style, etc. And we'll set it to be block is what we'll do, because obviously we need to be able to view it, and obviously it's set to none at the very start here, and for us to be able to even begin animating it then obviously we need to set it to be block, because otherwise we won't be able to see the animation. And then we'll set container selected to be true, so that none of the mouse overs will work after the initial mouse over has happened because of this if condition here at the top. So that, and then what we'll do to actually animate it, I'll just copy this because it's taken a while. I know it's a tutorial. Again, all my tutorials are long, but they're long for a reason, because they're not exactly the most lightweight, should we say. Tutorials are not very basic, kind of intermediate. But anyway, to animate it, because remember, it's scale 0.5 here. Well, setting this to be 1 will animate it from 0.5 to be 1, and same, sorry, no, here. Yes, animate 0.5 to 1 here, and same with opacity, it will go from 0 to 1. What actually, I know that this won't work, but what I'm talking about essentially, yeah, so what's happening here is it's not actually working, and the reason being is because we need to include this in a timeout, because basically what's happening is that because we change the display at the same time that we change these other properties which you want to transition, it means that these don't actually happen. Okay, and just before I get ahead of myself, I did actually notice an error there. That should be double underscores, as is the BEM proper naming convention. So now when we hover over this, as you can see, we are getting the very first, okay, just ignore that. Again, we'll solve this, we'll solve these problems later on, but we are getting the message box to actually appear. However, they're not animating in, and the reason why they're not animating in is because the display is being changed at the same time as these transition properties. And basically, because the display property we're not able to transition it, it means that because it happens at the same time, it means that these transitions don't actually happen because the display just prevents the other ones from happening. So what we'll do is in a set timeout method, it can be 0 milliseconds, it doesn't matter, just that it's literally an almost non-existent delay, but still a delay nonetheless. It will actually get things to work. So now, as you can see, what's actually working now, which is good for a start. Obviously, how do we get what? Once it's animated in, there's nothing we can do now because of this container selected. Well, it never gets set to false again, so you know this will never be called ever again, basically at the moment. So how do we select other things, and how do we deselect our initial selection? Well, what we will do is we will need to create a, well, first of all, actually, we'll need to initialize our mouse pause properly, because at the moment, this isn't in relation to our container selected, sorry, our main container section, which is what all of our values stored in our offset pause is in relation to. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to subtract main container section, which we can do, by the way, because remember, this will only be called if popover is initialized, and popover can only be initialized if set globals is met where main container section was initialized. So we'll subtract offset left. So now the mouse pause will be stored in relation to the main container section. So our mouse pause and our offset will actually be positioned in relation to the same thing, which is something that we need. And we'll need to do is for the y-axis as well, obviously, it's no different. Just offset top instead. And then we'll also subtract window.scroll y. And the reason we'll do that just in case they're viewing it like with a horizontal scroll bar like so, just in case, you know, they're scrolling, because otherwise if we don't do this then it won't take into account our scroll, our vertical scroll. So yeah, it's important that we include that. But anyway, once that is done, we will create some if statements, and they will detect whether or not we have hovered too far up away from our current selection, or too far down, or whether they've moved towards the sides, to not select anything else. So what we'll do, we'll say if mouse pause dot y is less than offset pause dot y minus 10, and remember offset pause dot y is the top edge of our current list item selection, and we're subtracting 10, so we're saying 10 pixels up from that. So if it's less than that, and mouse pause dot x is greater than the left edge, so if we're still within the horizontal boundaries of the li element, and we also need to see if it's less than sorry, not offset, oh my god, that would cause an error, sorry. Yes, offset pause dot width. Then we, at the moment, we'll just log something. Obviously we're actually gonna do something proper later on, but for now we'll just log yes, so that we can see, so that we can test that things are working. So we highlight over this, yes, and then we're getting yes now because we hovered up, and we're still within the horizontal boundaries of our list item, as you can see. I'll show you again. But if we hover over and then go to side and then go up, we're not getting yes anymore because we moved towards the side way too much. So that's one of the if conditions, and we'll return so that if this is met, then nothing below is ever called. We'll get rid of this now because we know that it's working. As for this one, this will be the same. The only difference is that this will be if we move too far down. If we move too far down, then offset, yeah, this will be height instead, plus 10. And the final if condition will be if we move too far towards the side, towards either of the sides. So we'll say mouse pause.x is less than offset pause.x, or so that this is as we move too far towards the left, and then if we move too far towards the right, then this will be true. And well, we don't need return because there won't be anything below this if condition to be called in the first place. So now what we'll do, we'll need to create a function that gets called in these three if conditions if they're met. So what we'll say, select adjacent list item, and then we'll have a single argument like so. And inside, the first thing that we will do is we will set selecting new item to be true. Whoops. So we set this to be true so that until this is set back to false again, nothing in the mouse move event listener will ever be called, because this if condition will just be met immediately. And what we'll do is we will set basically we'll animate the current popover out, and we'll do that by setting it back to its original values, both of its opacity and its transform. So that's not transform, that's opacity. So we will do that, and we'll also initialize, because we're going to reinitialize popover again very shortly, but we'll get access to what it is currently with what we're doing here. That'll be contained let popover local variable, and then what we'll do. So the animation is 0.15 of a second, which is the same as 150 milliseconds. So when the animation is done, so 150 milliseconds, we will say old popover.style.display, and we'll set that back to none so that it doesn't interfere with anything ever again, unless we quickly go back to the old popover, and we know that to be the case if the current popover is the same as old popover. If that is the case, if we've quickly gone back and forth, then we don't want to do this, because otherwise it will just mess things up. So I hope that makes sense, but anyway, our first condition will be if direction is set to clear, and this will be the case if this last if condition is met. So we'll actually write it out here. And we'll do the same for the other ones now as well. This one will be up, this one will be down. So yeah, we'll do it like that. If that is the case, then all we will do is we will call a function where all the global variables are reset to their initial values. So we'll we'll create this method right now. Oh yeah, as well, we'll also set the list item to remove the current selected class that it should have applied to it. Remember, it should have it applied to it from here, and also we'll set it in this method as well. Just hold on. So yeah, we'll move that, and then we'll copy these, set them all back to initial values. Obviously we need to remove the let, because we're not redeclaring the local variables, we're literally just resetting all these back to their initial values, global variables. So yeah, if that is met, then we'll just call that method, and then we'll say return. So don't call, if this is met, then don't activate any code that comes after this. However, if the direction isn't clear, then it's either up or down, in which case we will, you know what we'll do, we'll copy this, because we need to remove the current selection, because we're going to select another element that's either above or below. This one, actually wait, no, that's not what we're going to do, we'll do that later on. So yeah, we'll handle the other case now. Well, one of the other cases, and that's up, if the direction is up. So we'll say if basically if we are currently selected like the top one, like here, then obviously we go up, and there's no then there's no more items to select above this one. So if that is the case, we'll know that's the case if list item dot previous element sibling, if we know that if that is false, or well, sorry, undefined, sorry, which corresponds to this bang operator. So if that is the case, then again we'll reset everything because there's nothing more to select, and then we'll return, so never call anything that comes after this. If that isn't the case, and there actually is something above this one that we need to select, then we will remove the current selection, which also gets to happen in here as well, but obviously we're not going to reset all our global variables here. And then what we'll do is we will initialize list item to actually be the previous element sibling, so the one that comes before it, which we know to exist because this wasn't met, and then we will add this now to our new list item, and then we will set globals because, as I said before, this always gets called after every time we set our list item. And then again we need to just make sure that there is a popover for this list item, just for error checking to make sure that everything's safe, basically. And yeah, because we will be dealing with popover now immediately, and how we'll be dealing with it, well, again, we know we'll just animate it in, which you've already covered. How we're doing that here, so we'll just copy that from there, and then finally we will set selecting new item back to be false at the very end of this, so that we can get our mouse move event listener to continue working, and then return, so that never call anything after this. And finally, for down, it will be very simple. We'll just copy up, but we will make some changes, just very minor changes. Instead of previous element sibling, it will be next. So we'll place this like so. Next element sibling. And yeah, this should almost be the entire tutorial. If we, yeah, just ignore that. Yeah, so this is, yeah, and we can go back and forth like this. So this is the effect essentially. But again, you know, how are we going to deal with this? Because this is a different height. Because none of these heights of the message boxes, they're not set, because we can't set them because obviously we don't know how many lines of text they're going to be. So what we need to do is calculate the height based on the number of lines that there are, and then we need to set the offset top so that they are actually in the correct place, regardless of whether it's 2 lines, 1 lines, or 3 lines, etc. And I believe on smaller widths they actually, yeah, sometimes they bulk up to more lines. So what we need to do is remember this. Remember at the very top this function that we created at the very start. Well, what we need to do is we need to store the height of the popover, and very simply we do that popover dot client height, and then we minus 20. The reason why minus 20 is because we want to take into account that the padding that's applied to the text. And yeah, so we want to take this into account essentially. The padding, so we subtract 20 from the client height, and so that should take the padding into account. And then, but unfortunately this won't have any effect, and the reason why it won't have any effect is because the client height on elements that are currently set to display none, it will just initialize to 0. So what we need to do is, just for a split second, well, just for this line of code here, we will set everything back to display block. Again, the users won't even be able to see this happening because it will never get rendered because it happens way too quickly. And we'll also need to set all of this to be scale 1 as well, so it's full scale. Again, just trust me on this, it does work. and then we'll need to set transition to be none, so that happens instantly. It goes to its full width and height immediately with no transition. And then once we've stored the height, we need to set everything back so that obviously things are back to what they were beforehand. So again, we'll just copy this. This will go back to 0.5, and then this will just be removed entirely, so it will go back to its normal transition as defined by its class and not inline styling. And the way that we work out the number of lines that there are is we will say let lines equals math.floor, so always round down. So 1.1 will round down to just 1. And then we'll say height divided by 20. 20 is the line height, remember? So that's where you get that from. So this should tell us the number of lines that we have. Yeah, and then what we'll say let offset top equals, we'll need to set this to be minus. So I worked out that basically one line needs minus 55 pixels of padding, but lines after that, they need minus 20, so 2 lines needs minus 75, which is the reason why most of them are working, because most of them are 2 lines, and we already set minus 75 pixels top offset on our class already. So what we'll say plus lines minus 1 multiplied by 20, line minus 1, because remember it needs to be 55 pixels for one line. Obviously if it's one line then it will be plus 20, but we don't want that, so we'll say if it's just one line then this will go to 0, but if it's 2 lines then this will go to 20, etc. So that's how this works. And then finally, I know this was a long tutorial guys, but hopefully we got there in the end. Just message me in the comments box below if you got stuck at any point during this tutorial and the code pen page wasn't enough to help you, then I would be very glad to help you in the comments box below. But anyway, lastly we use backticks because we can using Webpack and we don't have to worry about compatibility. And then we'll set the top offset to be whatever's contained in here, and then we'll use pixels. We'll use that value as a pixel unit. So yeah, anyway, so this is everything's working now. As you can see, this automatically works now because of what we did. And yeah, everything's working. Just real quick, I'll just copy the other unordered lists from the completed project, and we'll just copy it in so that we have a completed project. So we'll copy them in like that, and then here we go. So as you can see, all of this is working. 3 lines, 2 lines. Okay, there's no 1 line to be fair, but all this is working either way. And yeah, this is what we have. Again, no message boxes here because of what we did with the window. And because by this point we're getting onto mobile widths, so we don't have the effect there. But anyway, I hope this tutorial helped you. I hope you learnt something from it. Please like and subscribe because I put a lot of effort into this tutorial, and I greatly appreciate any help that you might be able to give me. Plus it doesn't cost you anything. But more importantly, have a great day guys, and peace out.